to Sparks of Love. My name is Jerry Lynn Sparks, and today in studio we have Catherine Devlin, Dr. Catherine Devlin. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And I want to tell everyone I'm calling her Catherine, even though she is a doctor, is because I have known Catherine since she was in college, and she answered an ad that I had placed to help me with my children. I had 4 kids, all within 5.5 years, the oldest of whom has autism. I was freaking losing my mind, and I put out ads at the local colleges, and Catherine answered it, and she ended up being such a godsend to our family. She stayed with us the entire rest of her college career here in New York. So at least, you were here at least 4 years with us, I think, right? At least. Because I think you were getting your master's locally as well. Is that correct?
No, I got my master's after I moved to Chicago. I think it might have been like my sophomore year through my senior year, maybe.
Okay, so maybe 3 years.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to remember. It was just so people can put that on their mental timeline a little bit. The ad was a flyer hung up in the psychology department with pull the phone number tabs off of it.
Yes.
And so I put the phone number, probably in my wallet or something until I could get home and call, because you had to go home and call. So that's
God,
when that was.
That was a long time ago. So she's known my children since they were little, like preschoolers, and she would even help my daughter get ready for dance class. And she was very creative, very patient. I think you're in a good field. Dr. Devlin is a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in eating disorders. But the thing that I always knew about Catherine is that she's made for this, because 4 kids within 5.5 years. And and I was working in Congress some of the time that she was there. I was away. I needed help. And Catherine just managed it like she was their mother. Like, she was incredible and still a part of our family. Like, Jared called her Kaffroom. He couldn't say her name, so he called her Kaffroom. So when they were really little. So I'm always grateful for that. Now, I know her family. So it's just been a really nice full circle. And the reason I wanted to have Catherine on, not only because I've known her for so long and I know her, just her skill set, is that being a licensed clinical psychologist, I think that you have a perspective on love that Evan and Scott and I don't have. And so I kind of wanted to, within the rules of, being a therapist, what you could share. So I thought, because this is a podcast about love and all its forms, and I'm on a journey to find out a deeper understanding of love, because I certainly have not gotten it right. A previous guest said that they are chronically single. I'm like, I need a T-shirt that says chronically single, because I have, that issue. And you knew my ex-husband. You were there for numerous years. So I think that I'm not a psychopath, and that I'm deserving of love. I've just been having a hard time finding what I'm looking for. I'm picky, and I think I deserve to be picky. I think we all do. But I wanted to, just jump right in there. So just to start off with, can you tell me, from a therapist perspective and also from a personal perspective, your definition of love?
Oh my gosh, that's a really daunting question.
I do daunt people. I'm a daunter.
My definition of love. Oh my gosh. Ooh, I don't know that it can be distilled down to a single definition. I know that, when you had shared with me the topic of your podcast, I was sort of like, I don't know, what area do you mean about love? Like, are we talking about romantic love? Or are we talking about
all love
for,
Let's start with romantic love, and we can work our way down.
I think there are different types of romantic love. I think there's that partnership love where the person's your best friend and you care about each other. I think there is passionate love, where you get that excitement, that giddy feeling, like you just want to be around them, you just want to touch them. I think there's I think there can be an adoration kind of love, but I think that's a little more superficial. I think that there can be there's certainly sexual love that I think can be a little different, but also a part of romantic love sometimes. That's more intimate and enduring and gentler than that passionate love. So I don't know that I could really put it into one definition, but I think for a lot of us, when we talk about like looking for love, we're looking for commitment and someone who we can really like be a partner with, whatever that means.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, when I was a kid growing up, there was a show called Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And for people my generation, Marlon Perkins, it brings up this feeling of nostalgia, but also it was consistent. We knew that they would be there. And so what I've adapted into my own love language is when I meet someone that I feel like I can count on, like you said, commitment, being there. Every Sunday night, Marlon Perkins was there. My grandma and I watched him. And their tagline was, you know, we'll always be there. And so I have a code word a code phrase, like, is this person my mutual of Omaha? You know, that, I mean, Marlon Perkins aside, there's just something, there's something about that. Like, you know, one of my friends, I was on the phone with him the other night after the party that we had. I had a big party December 30th, and he didn't bring his wife. And I'm like, well, how do you know? Like, this is after all the party guests have left. How do you know that and I don't mean this in any insult to his wife. I meant in a general view. Like, how does anybody know, Catherine, that when they're not with their partner, they're not cheating on them? And that's where my trauma comes in. Like, I was cheated on in my marriage, and I have trauma from that. And so I have to work through that. How do we know that someone's committed? And do you see a lot of that in your therapy practice, if you're allowed to say? Like, is that a common reason, like that lack of commitment, that lack of trust, or that they've already had the trust broken? Is that something that is a common reason people seek therapy?
Because they can't trust?
Yeah, or they were cheated on. Like, is that common? Is that a common thing? Do people do that, or do they just dump the guy and they don't try to work it out, or they dump the girl and not try to work it out? You know, I'm just curious to see, am I, you know, I think I'm not unusual. I think there's a lot of people out there that have trust issues, or people are just playing the salad bar, you know, version of dating, and they're not.
Can you be my therapist?
I don't know, Catherine, are you taking new clients?
I think that'd be a conversation we'd have to take offline.
Okay.
But, you know, people seek therapy for all kinds of reasons. And I think that trust is sort of one of them. But trust also, I think, tends to be kind of a part of a bigger issue in a marriage. Like, I don't think cheating really happens in a vacuum. I think there are other issues usually going on. And that's kind of part of it. And that doesn't excuse it. You know, it's still like, there's an expectation when you're committed to being monogamous with someone. You need to be open and honest with them about that. And when you sign up for a life with someone, you have to be able to follow through on that and stay true to your word. But I think there's usually more to it. And
is that a deal breaker, though? Is that so? For me, there's a couple of ways of looking at that. Sure, cheating doesn't happen in a vacuum, but we have to be careful that we're not saying that the person did something to cause that person to cheat on them. I know that's not what you were saying.
No,
but that she's saying that is the rationale. Like, that is the mindset of why people cheat sometimes. I
mean, I don't want to speak for Catherine, but the way I interpreted it is that you're saying that there was a foundational problem with the relationship and the connection that person had with you, that it was all right in their mind to make that decision to cheat.
I think that can be one version of it. But yeah, I think there's always more to it. Whether there's something wrong with the relationship, there's something wrong with the person, which, like, if there's something wrong with you, how could that not impact the relationship? But I also think, like, we all have things that are wrong with our relationships to a degree. Like, the perfect relationship doesn't exist. And I'll often tell people, like, I think the secret to love is figuring out what kind of bullshit you can put up with and what you can't.
It's just
so true.
It's not possible to, like, find something without it. You know, my partner and I were just having a heated discussion about, like, the diaper storage and the way things are put in the closet and his lack of attention to detail on that. Hopefully he doesn't mind me saying that. But it's irritating, but that's the kind of bullshit I can live with, right? Like,
Yeah.
So you have to figure out like what you can live with and what you can't. But I do think if you think it's okay to betray someone you've committed to, no matter how difficult the relationship is or how bad things are, like that's on you. That's a problem. Because if you don't think your relationship is going well, it's up to you to let that person know and be honest about it. I think the worst part of infidelity isn't the cheating, it's still lying.
Yes.
That's why so many people are comfortable in polyamorous arrangements. Like if they're open about it, like, okay.
But there's gender differences too. So I know you know this, but I read this thing years ago that said that men can't stand the physical part of cheating, where women can't stand the emotional part of cheating. And I know that's a generalization. Have you found that to be the case in your experience as a therapist?
I don't know that I have enough context to comment on that.
Yeah, well, so for my relationship, I honestly feel that the person I was married to had strong narcissistic characteristics. I don't know if they were ever fully diagnosed that way, and I know that term is overused, but I was married 22 years. I think I can speak, with experience on that particular person's behavior. And there was an impulse control problem. There was an ego issue. And I can spot it now in someone very quickly. And I have what you said about love and relationships being how much BS you can tolerate. That's my line in the sand. I would never be able to be in a polyamorous relationship. I'm not slamming it. That's to each their own. For me, what makes love special is that there's a intimacy shared that we alone share together. And I don't, I don't want to say that I am like a control freak or an overly jealous person, but I do think if you're having an emotional affair, to me, it's the same as if you're having a physical affair and I'm done with you. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm out. I have that. And that's learned, that's honed from years of my own trauma in that relationship that I was in from my 20s until my early 40s. And so I know what the BS is that I will and will not put up with. And absolutely cheating of any form, I'm done with. I can't. That's my line in the sand. That's my litmus test. Because I feel like if you're willing to do something to lose me, then you lose me.
I also think, and I don't know if this is too much of a segue, but can we say his name? Are we allowed to say his name?
No, I don't say the name. Say the ex. Just say the ex.
You and the ex. You were so young when you got married. And I remember when you interviewed me for the job, giving me a tour of the house, and you had like wedding pictures on the stairs. And I don't know if you remember saying this. You're like, "Oh, that's my wedding." I think you were like 23 or something.
I was Evan's age when I got married.
I was 23 then. I got married way too young. And then you started to like talk, and then you're just like, you just moved off of it. But like even at that point, which wasn't that long into the marriage.
Yeah,
you were
10 years when I met you, I think.
Yeah, it was, you were already like realizing that maybe you made a mistake.
I did, I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I had year 3 of the marriage, I realized this is not working. And I married my best friend. He was my best friend. And I always choke up when I say that sentence, because that was, of everything I lost when I lost my marriage, it was losing my best friend to mental illness that hurts me the most. Because we were a lot alike in terms of intellectual development, the things that we liked. We did differ on music taste. I feel like my music taste was just a little bit different than him, but we really liked doing the same sorts of things. Sports were a huge thing for us, but we also were so different. Like I love nature, and he's never met a hiking trail he would want to go on again, whereas that is my thing. And music is my favorite thing in the world to do. So those two major things were different, but we were so young, we didn't know that about each other yet. And I really feel that if you're going to get married, you probably need to be a little more mature than we were. And at the 3rd year of the marriage, I realized that, and I actually left and got my own place in Santa Monica. I was a student, and we were apart for about 3 months. And during that time, losing me and me not knowing he had narcissistic tendencies, he really did try to change and shape up and start, grooming himself and actually showering and, being places not looking. He really had, towards the end of the first time before I left him for 9 months, he was just wallowing in what I now know is like clinical depression. I didn't really know clinical depression characteristics then, but I did everything to try to help him. Years later, when I finally did leave him for good, the same thing. He reverted back to that about 19 years after that first incident. And I tried again to get him the help that he needed. I actually called the therapist, made the appointment for him myself. And he went, but then he decided that he didn't need therapy, that it was everybody else in the world that was the problem. In that moment, I knew, okay, he's never going to do the work that it takes to get healthy. And it was harming my children. I have 4 kids with this man. His behaviors were bleeding out into our family life and scarring my kids. And so I decided that was the level of BS I was not willing to put up with, to use your phrase earlier, because it's now affecting my children. That is definitely my line in the sand. And all the years that I've been single, and I've been single, it'll be 12 years in July, I have never introduced anybody to my children. I want to make sure it's the real deal before I don't want a rotating I can't say the word, the revolving door of men in my children's lives. I don't want that. I want consistency. I think for me, consistency is my way of showing love to my children. I'm there for them. I'm the Mutual of Omaha to my kids. I have consistency. I have reliability. And I didn't want to have, them get used to a man that they really like and then we break up. I didn't want that. So, but I was really young, and I've always said, in neuropsychology, we learned that your brain in general is not fully developed until you're about 25 years old. That's why with like insurance companies, you'll see that the insurance rate for males especially goes down after age 25 because there's less of car accidents, there's less impulsivity, because you have actually the neuronal development that keeps on going. And so you have a fully adult brain until 25. And some people have even said that the brains of teenagers mimic those of psychopaths because of that. Gimme, gimme, gimme. I don't have the impulse control yet. And you see so many car accidents with teenagers driving because they don't have that impulse control. I wasn't a fully formed adult when I got married. Yeah. I was 23.
Well, and I think on a societal level, it's really like we know that divorce rates among people who get married under 25 are really high. And I think about I was in a relationship from the time I was 19 to 24, I think. And we've spoken since, and we both agree that it was what we needed at the time. But there came a point where we had both become really different, and it wasn't working, and we needed to end it. Because you just change so much at that age. There's so much growth. But I had always heard from particular mentors in my life, pretty much your 20s are for exploration. Don't worry about getting married and having kids until your 30s. And I'm so glad I took that advice, because when I think it's really concerning that in some demographics, young girls are permitted or even encouraged to get married and have kids when they're really young. Yeah. And, maybe it has to do with how just ageist we are, where women feel if they don't lock someone down before they get old, and self-objectification and all this stuff. But I think there's a real societal problem. And the fact that no adult in your life was Jerry, don't do this.
Well, I'm Southern, Catherine, and so as everybody can tell, I was actually older compared to my peers. There were people that were getting married at 18 and 20, and who were grandparents at 36, which freaks me out.
Shocking.
My youngest was born I think 2 months before I turned 34. I can't imagine being a grandma at 36, and they love it. To their credit, this is the South, the rural South where I'm from. People do get married really early. My mother had me at 18, and so she was a young, hip grandma. She is, in my kids' lives, and she can still do things. So there's pros and cons to each of it. And for the people in LA, I actually had kids early. I had Jared at 28. That nobody in LA was having kids. At 28. So I was really too old for the South. You're never going to get married. You're never going to have kids, because I was married 6 years before I had kids. Highly recommend that, by the way, because that gave us lots of years to get to know each other and build that. relationship and have a lot of fun. But then now I am still like only 2 years post empty nester, whereas my people that I grew up with, they've been empty nesters for a really long time. So it just depends on which end of the, childbearing years you want to have without kids. I think that me waiting till 28 was perfect. I just didn't want to be like the people that were having them at 20. I was still exploring the world, and I moved to LA and, just doing stuff like that.
Having kids so young too, and getting married so young, women don't focus on their career. They don't focus on their education, and it sets them up for a higher risk of poverty, and it just encourages more dependency on men. So this structure by which we like overvalue youth and women and encourage young women to get married and to have kids and to lock down a man, it really just contributes on a larger scale to our disempowerment.
Yeah. I want to hear Evan's perspective on that. So Evan's 23, right out of college. Do men have that same pressure to use Catherine's term, lock down? Like, it seems like we're like forcing these guys. But is the same pressure there for you to get married early and have kids?
100%.
Really?
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit, because I didn't know that.
I think it's more of a societal thing, to like look around and you see like, oh, like your buddy's getting married. Why aren't you married? Why don't you got a gal? Why aren't you starting a family? It's just, and it's more of like, I don't even know. I don't really know how to describe it. It's more of this pressure of, why aren't you going out there? Why aren't you being a man? Why aren't you sacrificing yourself and putting yourself out there and doing, I don't know, just
what's expected of you.
Yeah, doing what's expected of you. Why aren't you being the protector? Why aren't you being the server? Why aren't you like? Why are you doing stuff for yourself? But I mean, I felt that pressure, and I do eventually want to get married. I mean, it's probably going to sound hypocritical. I do want to get married eventually, but I'm not going to deny that pressure is there. I think it's definitely more there for men, because there is the stigma because you being single. I'm like, oh, you don't have a wife by 25 or 30. What's wrong with you?
See, I wasn't aware that
that was... What are you, a virgin? What are you, a sissy boy? Are you like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just that stigma of you have to be this in order to be,
Well, see, I have a 23-year-old son in college, and he has not had that from me. I have never.
That probably sounded really stupid. But...
No, not at all. No, but I've never
put that on him. I think it also depends
on
like your subculture. Like,
yes, I was just thinking
I live in the Chicago area, and like I would say in the city, men are not getting married in their 20s. Like the ones who are few and far between. It would be considered very taboo. Whereas like I hear from people who go to like college out in like more rural Illinois that there is the whole like ring by spring phenomenon. So I think it really depends on like where you are. I think if you're part of a religious community, it can be certain religious communities, there can be more pressure. How much like your family and your network value higher education and being able to like focus on that first. But I think it kind of depends. I don't think it's based on just gender, but I do think women are pressured to do it younger. And for women, it's more normalized to do it younger.
Yeah, probably it spans those subcultures a little bit more. I think she hit the nail on the head though. Like, we're not really New York City here in Rochester.
But is it really like a religious thing? Like, particularly with monogamy?
Southern Baptist, absolutely. So I grew up as a Southern Baptist, and my mom would say to me, my younger sister, Catherine, got married before me. Even I was pissed off. I'm like, what? Like, it was almost like a birthright thing.
But I'm not talking about like the subsections of whatever, like Catholic, because like if you've ever read the Bible or any of these religious texts, a lot of them do promote like polygamy, or they promote like, it's never like, only in like, I would say like maybe the New Testament do they talk about like you need a marriage is between like a man or a woman or whatever. So I'm just wondering, because in this country in particular, we have separation of church and state. So like, is something else enforcing that sort of stigma of you have to be married, do you think? What do you think about that?
I think there's a lot of like purity culture components that are not there in all religions, but I think it can be a big part of a lot of religions where there is that whole like emphasis on purity. and this like overvaluation of purity and like you need to save it for marriage. And I think that can cause people to get married younger.
Yeah, it was what was expected of me in the Southern Baptist culture, and I don't think nowadays it's probably as strongly as when I was growing up, but that was actually something that they valued. They didn't, like preach, you must be pure or anything like that, but that was certainly a subtext in there that you didn't want to be known as someone that, got around a whole lot, that a good wife was someone that had that purity that you're talking about. And I wanted to read something that kind of is related to this, the differences that are expected of men and women, those subcultures. So I watched the Barbie movie, and I expected not to like it. I expected to just think it was, just whatever. And I ended up loving it.
Not to cut you off, but I was actually really committed to not seeing the Barbie movie until all of the discourse started to come out around it. Okay. And I heard that there were like some hidden golden nuggets in it. And I'm like, this is actually subversive. Okay, yeah, I want to see this. I thought it was just like a money-making scam. But
me too.
Anyway,
I thought it would be too.
It appeared to me like one of those like old early 2000s like because Will Ferrell's in the movie too. Like one of those old-fashioned like early 2000s comedies that they marketed that somehow, because I don't know why like they did that, because when people went to go see the movie, it wasn't that at all. And I wonder if they did that to like get people to actually watch it, because I guarantee if they had marketed it how it actually was, nobody would have seen it.
No one would have seen it. It was total like trickery.
Marketing genius, right?
Yeah.
Also, one of my youngest son
deceptive,
is Gen Z. Well, my youngest son's Gen Z, and he's 20.
Sorry, there's just such a big like profiting off 90s nostalgia right now with like Nintendo, because all the millennial parents, their kids are little, and so they're really exploiting that the advent of the returning of Lisa Frank. And so I definitely it had like that kind of feel to it, like, is this just more like 90s nostalgia kind of stuff? Anyway, go on.
But I think nostalgia, like when you are in times of trouble, nostalgia, like when I first became single, and it was Suddenly Single, they should have a show called Suddenly Single, maybe they did. I reverted to nostalgia, and Facebook has those like time hop memories. And the other day, it was 2013. It was a year, I've been single for a year, and I've got little kids, And I wrote on my Facebook status that day something like, it's 1979, and I've got my streamers coming out of my bike basket, and all I'm doing today, the only thing needed of me today is to meet up with my friends under the apple tree. Like, that was it. Nostalgia actually serves a purpose of therapy. Like, it really does. Not if you live in it all the time. You don't want to live in the past, but you can bond with people over that. Just remembering, like I said earlier, the Mutual of Omaha, like a whole generation, like we perk up like meerkats. There's something therapeutic about that nostalgia. So I think
is there a danger of too much nostalgia though? Because
I think so.
There was I don't know if you guys ever, you know South Park, right?
Yeah.
In 2015, they did South Park did an entire season of they called Member Berries, because that was the whole, because 2015 was like the whole, like that was kind of like prime sort of, and we're still kind of riding off that nostalgia train, but you had like a reboot of like the Jurassic Park, you had Star Wars coming out, and it was literally just like the whole episode was like, remember Star Wars, remember Chewbacca? He's like, I remember. It's
true,
but there is
it's a good impression, by the way.
But it's just it is a huge problem. I have a particular problem with nostalgia, because while I do think there are benefits to it, I do think as a whole it is negative, because it keeps people in the past and it keeps them clouded.
I agree if it goes too far. Like, Catherine, do you find that nostalgia can keep people stuck?
That's why I didn't want to see the Barbie movie, because my sister grew up with like Barbies and all. I thought
all women grew up with Barbies.
Of course, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's the first. I mean, otherwise, how would you know your body's not good enough? You need Barbie to tell you that from a very young age.
Ooh, good point. Well, that brings me into the segue then. Let me read this, and then we'll get back in this. So this is the full Barbie speech, and this is the part of the movie when I decided this is more than just a pink fluff nostalgia trip. This is a feminist icon movie. And I'm going to read it. Okay, this is by America Ferrera's character in the movie. And I'm going to read the whole thing. It is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like, we have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin, And you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane. But if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women, because you're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood, but always stand out and always be grateful, but never forget that the system is rigged. So find a way to acknowledge that, but also always be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard. It's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll just representing women, then I don't even know. And that, I mean, even reading it, I get chills.
Like, which character said
America Ferrera's characters. They were in a room, a bunch of women, and she's just like watching all this, like, you know, frustration going around. And I had tears streaming in my eyes. And my son's friend, who's their age 20 now, took his girlfriend to see the movie. And he was so not, I don't think what he would consider himself a feminist, but he was, you know, a good guy growing up and has a great relationship with his mother. And he came out of that movie and he said, go see the Barbie movie. It is incredible. And I'm like, wow, there's actually hope for this generation because this guy got it. And everyone starts ragging on him, like on the Facebook comments, like, are you serious, dude? Like, this guy's in a rock band. He's like a guitarist in a rock band. He's like, are you serious, dude? Are you kidding with us? He's like, no, I'm serious. And I love that he owned it. He didn't shy away from it. He's like, no, this is freaking
Joe
important.
Rogan, I think, liked the movie too.
It's good. And I want to give you an assignment. Go see the movie. In the next podcast, I want to hear what you think about it.
Okay.
Gary, maybe
can I ask you a question though? Is the whole movie like that?
No.
Where it's just like a giant speech?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
It's one moment.
Okay, then I'll
It's
watch
cute.
it.
It's
But
very
Catherine-
funny. It's good. But Jerry, maybe part of your screening process for prospective dates could be to ask them what they think about the Barbie movie.
Ooh, I love that. Oh my gosh. The Barbie screening test. I love it.
What's there to test though?
Well, I think that the litmus test there is for, are they too over attached to traditional ideas of gender to where they just wouldn't even see it because of that, or that they dismiss any messages that promote, that highlight actually the oppression that women face. Because I think that like defensiveness among men when it comes to like facing the realities of gender dynamics is just such a huge turnoff and not at all compatible with who I think you would want to date, Jerry.
Yeah. Well, so my ex, just to give a little bit of background, Evan, he had 5 degrees and had PhD in neuropsychology, MFA in creative writing, BA in English literature, like incredibly educated. And the reason I think I married him, not only was he my best friend, he was the smartest person in the room all the time, and I could easily acknowledge that I don't need to be the smartest person in the room, and I was kind of in awe of his intellect. But he was not making it a game. And so many of the guys that I had dated before him looked like Land's End models, like they're incredibly good looking guys. And I was falling for the shiny object. You know, I was just like constantly having my heart ripped to pieces. With him, he made it very clear and very known that he was into me. And at that moment, I needed that. I was also really young, and that was very powerful because I had some problems in my relationship with the father in my life at that time. And so I think having someone so readily emotionally available was like nirvana to me. And I don't mean the rock band. It was like nirvana to me. Mm-hmm. I liked his forthrightness. I didn't have to worry where I stood with him. But as the years went on, what Catherine said about having that traditional gender ideas, it shocked me to learn that here this educated liberal man had those really ingrained old-fashioned sense of gender. His mother was a stay-at-home mother. She's a highly educated woman, but once her kids were born, she decided to stay home. She had a therapist degree like you, and she's also a professional artist. But her husband, my ex-father-in-law, had a THD in theology, and his job took him all over the Northeast, and so somebody had to be home for the kids. And so my ex grew up thinking as soon as the kids were born that I would stay home forever. And that was not my plan at all. And we had talked about it. But for somehow, he thought as soon as the kids were born, I would give up my career. And I didn't. As soon as my youngest was in kindergarten, I got a job working in Congress. Like I did the years of work and volunteer work to be able to hit the ground running once he was in full-time school. My ex didn't like that. He didn't like that I earned more money than him. He didn't like that I got published before him. Everything I did that was self-fulfilling to me, and I wanted my kids to be proud of me too. That mattered to me. He undermined it. He never showed up to my book signings. He never showed up to any of the congressional events that I ran. He made fun of me when the congressman resigned. I came home up the stairs the day of the congressman's national televised resignation to hear him laughing about it on the phone with colleagues. And I was so hurt. I just remember stopping on the stairs, catching my breath, turning around and walking away. And I think that moment was symbolically me leaving the relationship too, because he didn't share in my pain. He didn't share in my dream job being lost. And I didn't feel that sense of commitment or connection. And that was my line in the sand. Like, this man is not invested in the things that matter to me.
Okay, but can I ask, I don't know, because I don't want this to come off like tone deaf.
Don't worry, it will.
It probably will, but what does that have to, like, because you guys are mentioning like a litmus test with, like, what does not liking a movie have to do with
I think you're missing the point, Evan.
Well, I am. That's why I'm asking the question. That's what I'm saying. Because what I've noticed whenever there's a movie like this, because Barbie is not the only movie that's had a cultural touchstone.
Right.
Because like in the 90s, what was the biggest movie? Like if you didn't see this, you didn't get it. Like what was like of the 90s? What movie would you say? Because I know what it is.
Well, I'll let Catherine answer.
That was like a big Schindler's List. If you did not watch Schindler's List, this movie changed your life. You were not not in the known. You did not know. You did not live until you saw Schindler's List.
I don't remember it being that way.
Oh, I do. I live in the 90s, but like I remember in film class, like people talked about how big that movie was. But to move on to that point though, what was the big movie of the two? Like the big, like you had to see this movie.
Well, for my dating generation, it was When Harry Met Sally. Like the way you felt about When Harry Met Sally. I still watch that every New Year's, like somewhere in that week, New Year's week.
Right, but I'm talking about like a movie that touches upon like the social, political, and cultural zeitgeist. Like, and that movie.
Well, I saw Schindler's List live when it first came out, and I will never watch it again. Not because I didn't like it, but I guess I have trauma avoidance. I found it to be so painful.
Oh, yeah.
I watch movies for escapism. I got enough reality, man. I got enough real pain in the world. I can appreciate the artistry of that film, and I still remember it very well. I never want to see it again because Spielberg did his job really well, but I have trauma avoidance. I do need to watch a movie to feel like levity. I need to have something. I don't watch that show on TV, This Is Us, for example. Everyone's like, oh, I cry every week. You got to see it. I'm like, why the hell would I want to watch something that makes me cry every week? I don't want that. I want comedy.
But that's exactly my point, though.
But I think maybe when I refer to a litmus test, I'm not referring to whether or not you've seen it. I'm talking about how you feel about it.
But that's my point, though.
Seen it.
No, yeah. Right. That's my point, though, because there are like with each like decade, there is a movie that comes out like Schindler's List was that for the 90s. In the 2000s, it was The Passion of the Christ. How did you feel about Passion of the Christ? If you didn't see Passion of the Christ, how did you feel about that? But there are movies like that come out like for each decade. And my point is like, why does like a movie, whether you like it or not, why is that determining? Why is that determining?
It's not whether or not they like it. It's whether or not they'll even see it.
I think they can tell you something. The why and the how people think about things is very telling about their psychological makeup. Like I know from what Jerry just said, like, oh, Jerry struggles with distress tolerance. Like that's what I heard from what you said about Schindler's List. And that like may not be like a make or break thing, but that tells me like something about her. And so if someone were to say like, oh, I'm not going to see the Barbie movie, that's that's not what men do. Like, that tells me like, this person subscribes to very traditional gender roles. And for men who subscribe to traditional gender roles, they're more likely to be abusive towards their partners. I know that I, for one, and anyone who has any degree of self-respect would struggle with being able to like live their own life and have their own needs met if their partner subscribes to traditional gender roles. And just like Jerry was talking about like how he kind of eclipsed or dismissed everything that she tried to do and didn't let her exist as another person, his belief on traditional gender roles is kind of like a proxy, or it's related to that.
It was the thing that's the straw that broke the camel's back. I started realizing, like, I was so excited for my first 5K, and I had, gained a lot of weight when I had my fourth kid. And I do that thing where, I have to be thin, right? I don't do it now, but at that time I bought into that ideology. I've gotten a lot better about that. And I was really proud that within 6 weeks of starting to run in the stroller, the jogging stroller in the snow, I was literally jogging in the snow. I had just found out in February of 2005 that he had had an affair. And I just had nursed my baby for the last time. I nursed him 2 years. And the day before I had found out he had had an affair, he had confessed to me. And I had resolve. I remember like crying and looking down and nursing my baby going, okay, this is the last time. I'm going to crystallize this moment in my mind. I really enjoyed nursing him. It was literally giving life force to my kid. And then I'm going to get myself back in shape and I'm going to leave this guy. Like I knew that was happening. That was my resolve. And so when I ran my first 5K, I kind of let go of that idea. I'd gotten over my anger, but we were in therapy working it out. And everybody, and it was in Webster at some like hospice 5K or 4K or something. Everybody had people greeting them across the finish line and they were hugging. It was April by the lake and I'm looking all around this crowd, my first 5K, and he's nowhere there. That was so symbolic of our relationship. And he had gone to see a tall, hot blonde he knew who owned a coffee shop nearby and didn't greet me at the finish line. And I thought, wow, talk about not being there at the finish line of life for someone. I won for my age group, my first 5K, and I just had a fourth freaking child, and he wasn't there. And we got into a huge argument, and he said, I got the timing wrong. I'm like, but you couldn't just stay there at the finish line and wait?
Yeah,
and
he's the best.
Well, I don't want to get into
and
it.
So
but
the whole like toxic masculinity thing, the whole adherence to traditional gender roles, it kind of predicts like, is he going to let me take up space in the relationship? Will he let me exist?
Yeah. I didn't get to take up space. I was, in his mind, not being a good wife and not doing the things that he expected in that traditional gender role. But one of the things you said earlier, I want to go back because I've never heard this before. I want to learn something about this podcast. And I went to dinner the other night with a longtime friend, and she said, what are you learning about love from this podcast? And I just learned something from Dr. Devlin here. You said Jerry has distress intolerance. I don't know what that means. Can you, from a clinical perspective, help me to understand that? Because I want to know.
Like when there's an uncomfortable feeling, you want to get away from it. You want to avoid it rather than
that's true.
Like move through it.
Yeah.
And I think,
but is that wrong?
I don't know. Is it? I don't think there's a right or wrong in this.
It's not right or wrong, but it can be maladaptive. Like, for example, if I can't properly like grieve something, and I'm not saying it's like absolute, like, right? Like distress tolerance occurs on a spectrum, but we have to be able to touch and move through painful things in life. Like the microcosm of Schindler's List, if there's like an important societal message that you need to be able to receive by watching that movie, but you can't handle it emotionally, then you lose out because of that. Which like, that's just like one example, make or break. But like, if, as a parent, what I see a lot of times is parents telling their kids, like trying to like make their kids feel better, right? Like kids are upset about something, you tell them, oh, don't be upset about that. Here's why. You can get through it, trying to fix the kids' problems. When I don't know if you guys can think back to your own childhoods, when you talk to adults about your problems, you didn't want them to tell you that it was okay. You wanted them to like make space for it, to hear you, to empathize with it. But a lot of parents have a hard time sitting with and being present in their kids' distress due to their own distress tolerance issues. Like there's this fear of, I can't handle the emotion. It'll be too much for me. The emotion is harmful. And so like the degree to which we can deal with pain and behave adaptively can help with psychological flexibility, which ultimately helps us in mental health. And again, like it's not like good or bad. Like it's not like not good or bad. It's not like black and white. It's on a continuum.
That's so insightful. So I'll tell you a little bit about me, and I haven't shared this with Evan or anybody. I was the oldest child growing up, and I always felt like I had to be the family peacemaker because my mom and dad had a very tumultuous marriage growing up. They're fine now, but I grew up with this, like the Costanzas and Seinfeld is what I always tell people. And so I grew up really uncomfortable with arguing. And I used to be the one to rush, my brother and sister, they're younger than me by many years, out of the house because I wanted to shield them from that. And I wanted to like always fix it. And I'm known as the fixer. When I became divorced, one of the things that one of my friends said to me is, you don't always have to fix everything. Sometimes people just want a place to put the thing that's bothering them. I had to learn as an adult how to not be the fixer, how to just listen to my friends instead of always coming up with the solution. And honestly, I was embarrassed when they told me that that's what I was doing. I'm like, oh my, because I always grew up thinking of myself as a great friend, and I hope that I was, but I literally was constantly trying to fix things from my friends. And probably in my marriage, because he suffered from clinical depression, and I came up with a list of things he could do. And I'm probably still prone to like kind of leach back into that, but I'm catching myself now. What you said about creating space. The other night, one of my children called me, and it was like a whole hour of them telling me things that were bothering them. And I was so proud of myself afterwards because I didn't do that thing I normally would do. I didn't try to fix it for them. I just sat there, and I learned a psychologist term. I'm really sorry that this happened to you. And I had to work on that. That was not my normal reflex because I grew up trying to keep the peace in my house. There's something to that. I learned something here. I think that's awesome. Well, we have time for just a couple more questions.
But I do want to go back to a previous thing that she just said, which was very interesting about how it wasn't black and white. But but again, to bring about the point of like how this type of movie appears at each decade, a lot of people do treat it as black and white. If you don't see the movie or don't want to see the movie, you are this. But if you do see it and you feel such a way, then you are this. I'm just wondering, like, is that really a healthy sort of stigma we should be putting on the populace, and whether if it's like for a dating preference? Like, what did you think of the movie? Because this was a huge problem when The Passion of the Christ came out too. When because I don't know if you remember did The Passion of the Christ change your life?
Well, my ex-husband thought he was Jesus, so he did.
Did you not see and accept the loving arms of Jesus as he was being slaughtered on the cross? But that is the problem with those types of movies, though. And I'm just curious, if it's not black and white, why do people treat it as such? And if people don't want to see, or if they don't like the Barbie movie, if they like say like I'm not like I'm more of like a calm kind of like chill. I don't really care about traditional. I'm cool with whoever. If you're traditional or progress, whatever, you do whatever you want. But is that necessarily a problem if people do have some traditional values? And if not, why not?
I think it'd be a problem for Jerry. I think for some women it wouldn't, and it wouldn't be an appropriate litmus test for some women. But I would say, like, if someone told me their life was changed and moved by the Passion of the Christ, like, okay, well, that's probably not a person for me. I'm not saying they're a bad person, but like, right. I wouldn't want to be married to them because that would just show me that, like, at their core, we're so different. And there are just certain, like.
But is that a problem?
Yes.
For her it is.
She's saying absolutely. But
it's not a generalized thing. It's not a litmus test for everyone. It's a litmus test for certain people. If someone that I want to date
Oh my God,
doesn't like
Jerry's
Lord of the
speechless.
Rings,
I've literally never seen this happen.
What?
Well, here's what I would say. I am and I just had this conversation with someone really dear to me last weekend. One of their friends is very traditional gender roles and things. And I said, well, would they like me? And they said, this person, my friend, said to me, yes, because you're very open-minded. I am very open-minded, but I also am pretty honest with people really early into the relationship, like what my beliefs are. And I was not a twin of my ex-husband, and I'm okay. Like every man that I've dated since being single, for the most part, has been a different political persuasion. But some of that selection bias, like the population where I am, is skewed towards that way. If I'm ever going to date anyone, I've got to be open-minded. But I think Evan's point is that, is it okay to have those litmus tests? People get to decide for themselves what's okay for them.
No, absolutely. But I'm just saying, like, don't you think it may be a little hypocritical if people have certain perspectives on some, like, if you don't like this, then you are this. If it's the other way around, is that okay? Because everyone has certain likes and perspectives of their own.
Well, there's been studies that shown if you like a certain type of music, then you're going to have certain types of political leanings and things that you tolerate. So, for instance, I like pretty much all genres of music, but I prefer like new country and alternative rock, and some traditional rock. But I'm not a huge opera fan. I'm not a huge classical music, even though I do like those things. I'm not going to go to.
I like classical music.
Yeah, I know you do. But my go-tos are like, alternative rock, and then some modern country. Now, Jared, actually, Catherine, got me into modern country. I felt so much like an imposter the first time I went to a country show. I'm like, if I got my hood on, does anybody see me here? Like, this is so not my thing. I was blown away by Chris Stapleton. He also likes rock. But if you look at people when they start getting to know each other on dates, one of the things they'll say is, "Oh, what kind of music do you like?" Like that is a good indicator.
It tells you something about that person. But I think that like gender roles and your beliefs about gender roles are so important. Mm-hmm. And that's like, so like, yeah, we don't need to be a carbon copy of each other, but we need to be aligned about, like, if you heard America Ferrara give that speech in that movie and you thought that's a bunch of bullshit, or I don't believe that.
Yeah.
You're
not going to be a good
tell
match.
Me something about you.
Yes. That's true. It's true. And Kevin Costner, who's the star of Yellowstone, he read that speech, by the way, at some award show the other night. My love for that man just shot up. I love the idea that he's saying, yes, this is actually a true thing. I've worked in Hollywood for decades. I see it, and I'm getting chills right now. It shows that this is a person that's not threatened by a strong woman. And the same friend has actually texted me things where they're saying, like, you're very strong and independent. You don't need to know, like, every single thing that people are doing every single moment of the day. I give my kids, by the way, spaces in their togetherness. And I think at first it was for me, like, just a little bit of a relief, but I also want them to become the people that they are. And I think that's modeling for my children what they need to seek in partners in the future. Like, you've got to have someone that sees you and lets you be who you are and isn't threatened by that. My ex-husband, for all the degrees, Ivy League educated doctor here, threatened by me. I have one little degree, but I was out there doing and going and becoming, and he didn't like that.
Once you moved past being, was essentially a child, you morphed into this woman who was like very big and very strong, and there was no space for you in that marriage.
Yeah, that's true.
So it wasn't about like your degrees or your accomplishments. Like, you need to be with someone who can handle a woman who takes up space.
Yeah. Ooh, that's where we got to use that tagline.
And you won't be happy if you're not allowed to take up space, both physically and, personality wise.
I was thinking about that the other day. I woke up early in the morning and I had my house, the kids have moved out for the last 2 years, and I have renovated my house, and I've got it in a way that feels comforting and welcoming. I don't need to go to Europe to feel comfort. I've got a really cozy place, even though I do want to go to Europe. And I was thinking about how this is good. Like, I have built a life, a career, and a home that feels really good to me. I don't need a man to fulfill my financial needs. I really would like someone to share concerts with, dinner with, intimacy with, and conversations and movies and, stuff like that. But I'm a whole, fully formed person on my own, and having my own thing where I'm going to go out and see my friends is important. And one of my real good girlfriends who's 20 years younger than me, she and I were in the fire department together, and she actually did something I think Catherine's going to love. When she met her now husband, she said to him the first date, look, I am going to continue seeing my girlfriends. I am going to go on trips with them. I am going to, take off and go, snowshoeing one Saturday afternoon. I'm not going to be at your beck and call all the time. I'm going to support you. And he's had some health problems. She's been there for him. She has been his rock. She has managed everything. So she's saying to him, I need space to continue being who I am. Like that Khalil Gibran line, let there be spaces in your togetherness. And that was her litmus test with dating guys. Mm-hmm. Any guy that tried to silence a part of her heart and the things that make her her, she wouldn't date. And she met someone that actually supports that. And he has his own life. He has his own friends. Like coming together at the end of the day and asking each other, how was your day? And not knowing. And you each have something that you've done. Beautiful. I think it's so beautiful.
And I think another thing that I kind of want to comment on is that we also have to remember love is part of and also separate from compatibility. So what I often see people do is get too hung up on the emotions, right? I think that movies and television kind of set us up for expecting love to feel a certain way, for there to be fireworks, for there to be passion. And the reality is when you have a partner, that passion, it fades over time, first of all, but also that sexual or physical connection becomes such a small part of your relationship. You have to be able to share your life with one another. You have to be able to be roommates. You have to be able to be co-parents if you have kids. You have to be able to be partners in finance. There are so many areas in which you have multiple roles, and you can have such strong passion and love and fireworks for somebody and have it completely not work out in the other ways. And so I think that when we put too much emphasis on having the quote right or wrong emotions about someone, it really sets us up for failure. And I think compatibility is far more important.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good point. And, just to end here, because I know we're almost at the hour, if you had in your work as a therapist, if you have one word that you could use to see where people are getting it right, and then one word for where people are getting it wrong. Can you distill it down to two things? When you're looking at the chart afterwards, you're this person, Jerry has, distress intolerance, or, there's a commitment issue, or there's trust issues. Is there a common theme that you're seeing repeatedly when people are not finding love, that you could comment about?
Yeah, I think that for a lot of people, it's belief in their own worth. And I see a lot of folks spend too much time with the wrong people or hold on to things that are not going to work out because they just don't believe they can do better.
Oh my gosh. I see that in careers too, analogy. There's someone I know that I really feel is undervaluing themselves in their career. And I was just talking to someone last night. I'm why are they staying there? They have, and they don't have that belief in themselves. So I love the idea of that. And I think I struggled with that too. I felt when I married him, I married this Ivy League educator. I won the lottery. And someone said to me at a party once at UCLA, they said, you know what? When are you going to realize he's the one that won the lottery? And that was game changer right there. Sometimes it takes someone else seeing your worth for you to see it through the different lens. And I think as a therapist, that's probably part of your job, right? To help them see that.
Yeah, to kind of hold up the mirror.
Yeah. Well, this has definitely held up the mirror today. I learned something about myself, and that's a big goal for this podcast. So thank you, Dr. Devlin. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you
were
for
such a joy.
Me.
You're just such a joy in my life, and it was the best ad being answered ever. So I'm just so glad that you and your family are in my life, and now we get to share your beauty inside and out with the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun today.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to Sparks of Love, and hope you have a great week.